Georgian opposition, as well as the country's own citizens, continue to object the results of the recent parliamentary elections, where the winner, the pro-Russian Georgian Dream Party, was accused of rigging the vote. This led to an escalation, with a wave of protests currently taking place in Tbilisi. Joining me now to discuss the latest developments is Salome Zurabishvili, the president of Georgia. Madam President, thank you so much for joining us here on TVP World. So as we've seen so far, there's an abrupt escalation of violence towards the protesters. What is your response to the actions taken by the police towards people who are simply exercising their right to protest?
Well, there is clearly protest everywhere, and the repression is such and so savagely, I would say, carried on, that it's only leading to increased protests. Every day there are more people on the streets. Every day there are more people in the different cities of Georgia, which before did not usually happen. It was always concentrated in Tbilisi. And we see the extension of a civil rebellion movement in as such as people in different administrations write petitions or leave their jobs, their functions. It's a case of many ambassadors of the Georgian diplomatic corps, many ministries. The business is not completely siding now with the ruling party. So there is a situation of national, I would say, dissent, which it escalated not only because of the rigging of the elections and the protests because of that, not recognizing the legitimacy of the parliament, but also, and more even, when the prime minister that is issued from these non-recognized and illegitimate elections declared in a statement 5 days ago that Georgia was renouncing this path towards European negotiations of adhesion, and was delaying all of that until somewhere 2028, as if Europe was waiting for Georgia and could change the path of this process. And that really led to an eruption of protests in the country, because 80% of our population wants this European future. And the demands are there. People are demanding that their vote, their voice is returned to them, and that their European future is returned to them.
And what would you say is your opinion on the police action? Because as we mentioned before, there is a certain escalation, and things are getting more and more heated.
What do you want me to say about police action? This is savagery.
I want you to tell me what you feel about this and how you see it as the head of state.
Feel when there is a repression that is systematic, where it's not police. The police is not in charge of that. It's these special forces that are not identified, that have their face covered, and they take the people, including at the end of the demonstrations. They pursue them in the hall of their buildings. And then when they arrest these people, they're beaten. 80% of them are beaten and have injuries to the face and to the head, which shows that it's very systematic and very well directed. That is intolerable. And that is the thing on which we think that our European partners have to react very strongly, and I see that already there is this reaction is coming, and some of the countries have already expressed their intentions to impose sanctions on those that are responsible of these violences. And for instance, Canada also, outside of the European Union, has taken these measures.
I wanted to take a moment to look at some of the latest comments by the Georgian Prime Minister, who declared that the state system and society are, I quote, in a state of self-purification. This is how he commented on the signing of the open letters by the public offices. You mentioned some of the members of the diplomatic corps who decided to revoke their posts. We have heard about different office workers who are against whatever's happening in the country now. Self-purification, what from?
I don't know. I'm not commenting the words of the Prime Minister. What is clear is that there is in the whole of the administration, public service, as well as the private sector, there are huge numbers of people that are now signing the petitions where they ask to return to the European path of Georgia. That is the one demand, and for that they want new elections because they do not trust that this government that has shown now its proximity with Russia. You have to see that each and every step that this government is taking against the European Union and to sever the links with the European Union are complemented by Mr. Putin, Mr. Medvedev, or Mr. Dugin. So that is very clear for the Georgian population that has a long experience of these relations with the northern neighbor. So you don't need to explain what is happening to the Georgian population. And that's why they are reacting, because they have a history of knowing what happens when you let Russia have its word in Georgia. So they're not ready to accept that.
You, as a head of state, also had an opportunity to walk out onto the streets and actually to look these officers that you mentioned in the eyes and actually talk to them. Do you mind sharing what you actually told them?
Well, I asked them, I wanted to see whether you can raise among them any moral reaction. I wanted to see whether they were feeling at ease with serving the interest of another country and not of their own country. But clearly, you do not get any reaction from them. They are serving what they feel, or they do not feel what they see as being their own interest and the orders they receive. I don't know from where they receive the orders, but I know that they are not serving the interest of the Georgian population. They're not defending the Georgian population. And what is very important to know, because there is also propaganda on that there are not two Georgias that might go into confrontation with each other. There is one Georgian population that wants Europe, wants its independence, wants its freedom and to become part of the free European community. And there is today a regime, and that is called a regime, that is serving Russian interests and that is using for that force and those repressive forces that they have at their hand.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned Mr. Medvedev, you mentioned Mr. Putin. In your opinion, what role does Russia play in whatever's unraveling in Georgia as of now?
Well, Russia plays the role that it's playing everywhere where it can try its hand. And we've seen that Russia has tried to also affect the elections in Moldova. Did not succeed because the diaspora was there and saved the elections. Russia is today trying something in Romania, which I think everybody should be concerned about, and has been trying that through elections and through post-elections in Georgia. But I don't think that the Georgian population, who has had a long experience, as much as your country, a long experience of dealing with Russia, is ready to accept to lose what it was so close, that is the opening of the European door. And that's what explains what's happening.
As we look back in history, 10 years ago, Kyiv's Maidan was attacked 3 months after 3 months of protests. In Georgia, the response is to the demonstrations has been immediate. Do you think that a similar scenario to Maidan could potentially take place? And could we possibly expect some sort of an intervention, military intervention from Russia?
I don't expect one or the other. Nothing can be ever excluded, but I think that we have a path that is a Georgian path that is different. Here, the population is remaining in very clear constitutional margins, asking only for one thing, which is that elections have been rigged and they should be replaced by new elections. And every movement and every protest is very peaceful. So is the civil disobedience movement. And we're going to stay on that path because we know the risks. And I think that the Georgian population for that has had its own experience, the experience of others. So we are navigating these waters in a very more cautious manner, and I think that will go through. With the, of course, support of our European partners, and much depends on them, much depends on their very clear messaging and their very clear decisions. It's not only enough.
Pardon the interruption, Madam President, but what kind of a reaction and what sort of a response and action are you expecting from the EU and the West?
Well, clearly sanctioning those people that are responsible of the repression, responsible for rigging the elections. Everyone is very well identified, and that would be a clear signal that EU, when it has its word, is keeping up to its word. EU has seen the very anti-European rhetoric of this ruling party for over now almost a year, and EU has had recommendations for Georgia, its justice system and many other directions which were not addressed by this government. I think it's time for the EU to take the measure of what is happening and know that when you want to stop that here or elsewhere tomorrow, one has to react. And the reaction, it's also a reaction supporting Ukraine, because everything that's happening in Ukraine, of course, has an impact later on Georgia. So it's a whole image in which Russia should not be allowed to feel that it can do what it wants, it can advance and use what it feels maybe as being the weakness of the West.
Thank you so much, Madam President. Thank you for your time. Salome Zurabishvili, the President of Georgia, was my guest. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.